What's going on, guys? This is Crash Shot MMA. This is my first video, and just doing some UFC 311 picks. A little bit late because this video is going to be coming out probably on Friday, so one day away from the actual pay-per-view card. But I figured it's better just get my picks in now before the card so I can look back. But yeah, I'm going to go through every fight on the card, early prelims, main card, everything, and talk a little bit about each matchup, who I think's gonna win. Let's just get into that. So, opener of the card, Tagir Ulanbekov versus Clayton Carpenter. This is honestly a really easy fight to predict for me. I've seen a surprising amount of people pick Clayton Carpenter, probably just because he's undefeated, or they are just casuals and don't understand or haven't watched any of Tagir's fights, but I think Tagir is very good. He's very big for the division, 5'7" as a flyweight, and I just think he's going to be able to beat Clayton Carpenter everywhere. I think he's going to be able to out-grapple him, and honestly, I'm going to probably pick him to find a late submission, maybe round 3 submission would be my official prediction for this. So, yeah, I just don't think Clayton Carpenter is good enough. I just don't think he's as physical. And don't get me wrong, he has some good aspects, but overall, I just think he's going to lose his undefeated streak in this fight, and I think Tagir is going to be able to pick up this win. Plus, he has Coach Habib in his corner, so, you know. For the next fight, Ricky Turcios versus Bernardo Sopaj. This fight was actually a little bit harder for me to predict than maybe it was for some other people, because I do actually think Ricky Turcios is a little bit underrated. You know, he had some very impressive moments at the start of the Raul Rosas fight. You know, he had him in trouble with one of the submissions. He did ultimately lose. I think he's not as bad as some people pretend he is, but I don't think he's good enough to beat Bernardo Sopaj. I'm picking Bernardo Sopaj. I was just more impressed with his performance against Vinicius Oliveira at the start of the fight. Even though he did get, obviously, highlight reel KO'd in the last round, I think he actually won the first 2 rounds. I think he's well-rounded. I honestly think he's just going to beat Ricky Turcios. I'm going to go decision. I can see Ricky not getting finished, but, you know, that's just my opinion. But moving on to the next fight, which is Rinya Nakamura versus Muin Gafurov. Gafurov is going to lose this fight, or at least I hope he does. I think Rinya Nakamura, he's undefeated. I just think he's better than Muin Gafurov. And overall, I just don't see as much of a path to victory for Gafurov here. I mean, don't get me wrong, he could get it done, but I'm just a little bit high on Rinya Nakamura right now, so I'm picking him to win. Plus, I hate Muin Gafurov. He's a disgusting little hairy goblin. Next fight, Zachary Reese versus this bum right here, Azamat Bekoev. Doesn't even have a image up on the UFC website yet. It's his debut on short notice. I forget who Zachary Reese was originally supposed to be fighting, but I am picking him in this matchup. Anytime there's a debuting fighter on short notice, I usually pick against them. I just don't think it's very smart to pick for them, because not only are they coming in on short notice, they just haven't faced a lot of competition as good as some of the UFC fighters that they have them matched up against. And I think Zachary Reese is actually an alright fighter. I don't necessarily know what I would pick him to win by. I could, honestly, I'll just say round 2 knockout, because I could definitely see him like having a fairly competitive round 1, but winning it pretty clearly. And this Azamat guy has a surprisingly good performance round 1, and then just gets knocked out in the first couple minutes of round 2. So that's what I'll pick. And then moving on to the prelims, and to a fight that I actually find very, very interesting. This is actually one of the fights that I'm most excited about. is Grant Dawson versus Diego Ferreira. So this is actually like two, like not quite prospects, but two guys in the lightweight division that have had very good performances recently. Grant Dawson obviously taking out his last couple of opponents pretty easily, just implementing that wrestling and ground and pound game plan that we always see from him. And then Diego Ferreira had a very impressive performance against Mateusz Rebecki, who he would just came off of a win over Miktabek Oralbai, which was another impressive fight. So I think Diego Ferreira is a lot better than some people give him credit for. Grant Dawson is obviously very good. I'm pretty sure he's still ranked like 15 right now or 14. But Grant Dawson is an elite wrestler. He's been taking out a lot of people recently. That being said, I am going to pick Diego Ferreira here, which might come as a shock to some people, but I think he's actually a very good underdog in this fight. A lot of people forget this, but like about a year ago, I believe, Grant Dawson got flatline KO'd by Bobby Green. He literally got KO'd off of a jab. So it was more of like a got dropped by the jab and then finished with some extra ground and pound shots. But Grant Dawson got dropped by Bobby Green's jab, which is just not a good look. Like, I know he's had several good performances his last couple of fights, but I can't overlook getting dropped by Bobby Green. And Diego Ferreira, he's a bit older than some of the guys that Grant Dawson has fought recently. But I was very impressed with his last performance over Mateusz Rebecki. You know, weathering a bit of an early storm, like showing off his toughness, his cardio, his scrambling ability is really impressive. And honestly, I'm gonna pick him to get a round 3 KO. I think he'll probably maybe lose the first round to Grant Dawson due to some wrestling. And then maybe the second round, I feel like he'll be a little bit faster and more fresh. And I think he might win that round or make it a lot more competitive. And I think the third round, Grant Dawson will be a little tired out from wrestling him. And I think Diego Ferreira is going to be able to out-scramble him, get up to the feet. And I think on the feet in that third round, he's going to be able to land some big shots. And I think given that Bobby Green was able to do that to Grant Dawson, I think he's going to put away Grant Dawson pretty easily in the third round. So round 3 KO for Diego Ferreira, maybe like a TKO against the fence, that kind of thing, but that's what I'll pick. I'll pick Diego Ferreira for that one. Next fight is Bogdan Guskov versus Billy Elekana. This guy is a bum. No picture on the UFC website. Short notice replacement. I don't know why they have him as a favorite over Bogdan Guskov, but I'm picking Bogdan Guskov to knock him out in the second round. Or even that, you know what, first round TKO. Because I can't imagine, like, I think Bogdan Guskov is a really good up-and-coming or rising prospect, not even prospect, just contender in the light heavyweight division. I was very impressed with his last performance. I think he'll get better, too. And I just think he's going to be able to utilize his full skill set on a guy who's coming in on very short notice after Johnny Walker pulled out due to an injury. And honestly, I was going to pick Bogdan Guskov to beat Johnny Walker there anyway. So overall, I just think that Bogdan is going to be able to beat Billy Elekana pretty easily. I'm going to say round 1 finish. It could even go to decision if this guy impresses me, but like I said, coming in on short notice, I think Bogdan's very dangerous. I just think he's going to be able to get the job done, and I don't think it'll go the distance. The next fight, Jailton Almeida versus Sergey Spivac. This is a fight that I'm actually like very excited for. So I'm actually a fan of Jailton Almeida, which sounds crazy. Everybody hates this guy. Like, side tangent, this guy is like, in my opinion, the most overhated heavyweight. Like, he had the one bad performance against Derek Lewis where it was very boring. I'll give you that. He just smudged him for 5 rounds and wet blanketed him. But he's other than that fight, he's just finishing guys. He submitted, what's his name? The blob, Alexander Romanov, and he had a very dominant performance against Curtis Blade until he got TKO'd there, which is a mistake I don't think he's going to make again. Sergey Spivac, he's good. Don't get me wrong, he's good. He won his last fight against Marcin Tybura, which I actually picked Marcin Tybura to win that, so that was pretty good. He's got one of the better ground games in the heavyweight division, but I don't see him beating Jailton Almeida. Honestly, I don't see Sergey Spivac beating anybody except like the bottom of the barrel, like blob heavyweights that are typical, like past number 10 in the rankings. So I think Jailton Almeida is just more physical. I think he's a better technical grappler, more explosive. I think he beats Sergey everywhere. I think he's going to be able to out wrestle Sergey. I think if he does end up in a bad position, he'll be able to reverse or scramble out of that position a lot easier than Sergey would if the positions were reversed. And honestly, I might even pick Jailton Almeida to submit him in the first 2 rounds. Um, but honestly, no, I think I'm going to say third round submission for Jailton Almeida. I think Sergey Spivac is going to do a lot better than some people might think, because I do think he's a little bit underrated. He's definitely not as bad as those people like Alexander Romanov or anything. But I just don't see him beating Jailton Almeida, who is a guy that I think easily could be top 5 right now. Yeah, I'm going to pick Jailton Almeida by round 3 submission after a somewhat competitive first 2 rounds. So that'll be my pick. Moving on, we have in the bantamweight division, Peyton Talbott versus Raoni Barcelos. So, Peyton Talbott, number one, dude, this guy hasn't fought in so long. So he knocked out that one guy, what's his name, back in, what was it? April, May? Somewhere around that time, or June, I think it was. It was June. Knocked him out in 20 seconds, and then took all the way to January off to fight his next opponent. This guy is, don't get me wrong, he's definitely a top prospect, but his inactivity is a little bit annoying. But regardless of that, he's coming into this fight 9-0, undefeated, against Raoni Barcelos, who, don't get me wrong, I think Raoni Barcelos is definitely like a good fighter, but I think Peyton Talbott, I believe in the hype. This guy is the real deal. I think he's definitely the best prospect coming out of the bantamweight division. His striking is great. His confidence is great. A lot of strikers who are very technical, you'll notice they are a little overly defensive sometimes, or they worry a lot about what their opponent's throwing. Peyton Talbott, especially in his performance against Cameron Simon, shows he trusts in his own ability to strike, and he's very confident, and he's also quite physical. I honestly don't think he's going to get outstruck for a while. At least it would have to be someone at the top of the division, and I don't think that's Raoni Barcelos. Honestly, I think Peyton Talbott's just going to outstrike him for the first round and then knock him out in the second. I think he'll survive to the second round, because Peyton Talbott generally, most of his performances, he's not knocking people out in 20 seconds like he did to that French guy. I keep forgetting his name. But Peyton Talbott, I feel usually will hurt you and land a lot on you round 1, and then round 2 he'll really turn it up. So honestly, I think Peyton Talbott is going to knock out Raoni Barcelos in the second round. Honestly, I think it's going to be a highlight reel type of thing where Peyton is hurting him in the first round and puts a lot of damage on him. And then starting into that second round, I think he's going to be able to start landing a lot more. And the accumulation of damage is going to allow him to just land a 1-2 or something, or maybe even a head kick. And I think he's going to knock Raoni Barcelos out cold and go to 10-0 and then not fight for another 8 months. And then moving on to the main card opener. And this card is so stacked, by the way. But the main card opener, Kevin Holland versus Reinier de Ridder. So this fight's really tricky in my opinion. So before I get to who I'm picking, I just want to talk about this. Kevin Holland is the worst fighter to pick against. So I will never bet on a Kevin Holland fight. Just this guy will randomly have an insane performance, and then he'll just lose his next 2 fights. And, a lot of his fights that he has with good grapplers, which is a person like Reinier de Ridder, RDR, great grappler. A lot of times what you see is that Kevin Holland gets taken down and then he just sort of lays there, gives up a little bit, uh, just hits him from the bottom a little bit, and ultimately loses that fight. I don't see him like getting submitted here, like because I do think Kevin Holland has underrated jiu-jitsu. So in like actually going into this fight, I do think that Kevin Holland will be able to survive there. And Rainier de Ritter, his striking is actually low key trash. Like I don't think he's a very good striker. And I think Kevin Holland, if this was just a pure striking matchup, would beat him. But I think RDR is going to be able to mix in the takedowns and just get enough control time in rounds, threaten submissions, maybe even have a close submission attempt in one of the rounds that I think he's going to be able to win at least two of these rounds. I low-key think Kevin Holland is going to pick up maybe like the first round, just outstriking him, out-damaging him, maybe even drops him at some point, which I could definitely see with Kevin Holland's build. He's got the speed because he fights at welterweight in the past, and I could see him doing some damage in on the feet in the first round, and then I think after that we're just gonna see the typical, like similar to the what's it called, um, other fights that he has with heavy grapplers. I think he's just gonna get taken down, and I think he's gonna get smudged a little bit. And I think RDR might even be able to find a late submission, but I'm not gonna pick him to do that. Because he did struggle against GM3 a lot. So, yeah, I'm going to pick RDR via decision, 29-28, maybe 30-27. Moving on, we have a fight that I'm very excited for, which is Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. So, in case you didn't know, I'm a huge Moicano fan. Moicano is actually one of my favorite lightweights. I just think he's hilarious. He has a funny personality. And I have picked him to win his last 4 fights. I think he's very good. People forget that he was like an elite featherweight for a while. And I think now that he's up at lightweight, I think that he's even better. He is a bit older, him and Beneil. But I do think that Moicano is going to win this fight. I'm picking him again. I think his win streak is going to continue. Beneil Dariush, granted, I think people are underrating his chances in this fight a lot. So, like, they're thinking of him as this old man when in reality he's the same age as Moicano. But I think his chin is pretty much gone at this point, and I don't really think that he's that much of a better striker on, like, in the octagon than Moicano is. Moicano and Dariush, they're just a little bit plotty and slow on the feet. They're both pretty decent on the feet, though. But because of Beneil having that weaker chin, I could definitely see a situation where Beneil is maybe slightly outstriking him with superior technique for a little bit, and then maybe gets hurt from a right hand from Moicano that lands eventually, just because Moicano has a little bit more power and Beneil's chin isn't that good. So I could definitely see that happening. And as far as the grappling goes, Beneil Dariush is obviously a very good grappler. I mean, look at the performances like against Gamrot and all of that. I definitely think that he's going to be able to give Moicano a run for his money. Pun not intended, my bad. But I do think that Moicano will be able to get him down easier than some people might think, because Beneil Dariush does have a very good takedown defense. It's like 80% or something. Yeah, 80% takedown defense, which is very impressive, don't get me wrong, and I think Moicano might struggle a little bit to get him down, but I think he'll have a sort of thing where he'll get down Beneil before, like, Beneil expects it, like Beneil maybe, or after, sorry. I think they'll be striking for a little bit, and then Beneil will stop worrying about the takedown a bit into a round, and then Moicano will catch a kick or something similar to what he did with BSD, or maybe he'll just straight up, like, shoot a double leg, and he'll get Dariush down. And granted, I do think that Beneil might be able to out-scramble him a little bit, but I just think in terms of who's going to be able to threaten submissions more and cause damage on the ground, I think Moicano is going to be slightly better. Honestly, I see this fight as Moicano just being slightly better everywhere. So I am going to pick Moicano to win this fight via decision, 29-28 or 30-27. I just think he's going to have a competitive fight with Beneil, but I do think he's going to just beat him everywhere. Like I said, I just think has a lot more momentum right now. I don't see Beneil beating him, although I would have liked them to give Moicano a little bit of a higher step up in competition than Beneil. Beneil has lost his last 2 in a row via KO, and he's only one spot in the rankings higher than Moicano. That being said, I think what they're probably doing is planning for Moicano to win this and then give Michael Chandler to Paddy Pimblett and then, build the fight off of that. But, yeah, like I said, I'm going to pick Moicano in this matchup, but this is definitely a fight I'm very excited for. Moving on, we have the featured fight of the card. This fight is actually one that it might be my most anticipated fight on this card, just because of how interesting this matchup is. You have a guy in Yuri who is coming off of getting knocked out by Alex a couple of times, but also that impressive performance against Alexander Rakic at UFC 300. And you have a guy in Jamal who obviously talks a lot online, with the whole thing with Yuri, saying that Yuri got dominated, Jamal just got caught. I do think Jamal's a little bit delusional in moments, but I think he's also very good. When I'm looking at this fight, it really comes down to 2 scenarios. Either Jamal knocks out Yuri, or Yuri goes out there and just auras his way into winning another fight. And honestly, it's very difficult to decide which one it's going to be, just because whenever you think that Yuri's going to lose a fight, half the time he somehow manages to just pull it off with no technique. Like, the Rakic fight showed me a lot in that Yuri can just grit through getting hit a lot by someone who has superior technique to him and then just land that one big shot. That being said, I am going to pick Jamal Hill to win this fight via knockout. I think Jamal Hill has superior striking fundamentals, which, to be fair, is the case with pretty much everybody Yuri fights. But I do think Jamal Hill is better than anybody, or obviously other than Alex, but better than anybody Yuri has ever fought, better than anybody Yuri's ever beat. And overall, I think Jamal Hill, he has a lot of power. His left hand is definitely an issue for Yuri. And I don't think the leg kicks are going to be as much of an issue as they were in either the Ferreira or Rakic fight. But I just think overall that Yuri hasn't improved his striking enough. Maybe he'll grapple and maybe he'll get Jamal Hill down early. But I don't think Jamal Hill is going to get taken down immediately and then just lay there and end up getting submitted by Yuri or TKO'd. I honestly think that even if Yuri does decide to grapple, Jamal will be able to get it back to the feet at some point and survive the grappling exchange and then land on Yuri. And I don't see Yuri doing what he did to Rakic, where he just sort of weathers it and then lands that crazy head kick. I think Jamal's defense is a little bit spotty at times, but I just think that when he lands on Yuri, he's going to follow up. I just can't see Yuri winning this fight against Jamal. I think Jamal's going to knock him out. And I am actually kind of rooting for Jamal a little bit. I do want to see that rematch with Ferreira. So I'm going to pick Jamal Hill here. He's going to take off his shift at the salt mines and knock out Yuri Prochazka. So that's a very exciting fight, though. Moving on to the co-main event. This fight is super exciting. Merab versus Umar for the bantamweight title. This fight has been built up so much, Merab's been talking a lot. Umar's been talking a lot. Umar seems to almost be a little bit in Merab's head, but I do think that this is a very compelling fight. Umar is one of the most well-rounded fighters we've ever seen, period. His striking is elite. He was outstriking Corey Sandhagen for most of their fights, in their last performance, and his kicks are amazing. They're very high level. His boxing is not necessarily the best, but then again, he's fighting Merab. And of course, he's a Dagestani. His wrestling is some of the best wrestling in the sport when it comes to grappling. Merab, on the other hand, impressed me with his performance against Sean O'Malley because I did pick O'Malley to knock him out, and Merab showed that he has good boxing defense, and his wrestling is, it works as it always does. That being said, I, along with I feel like pretty much everybody else, am going to pick Umar Nurmagomedov. I don't see Merab beating him anywhere. I think Umar arguably just has better wrestling, and I could even see him just taking down Merab and stuffing Merab's takedowns. And at distance, on the feet, Merab has no chance. I mean, we saw in the O'Malley fight that O'Malley's kicks, were the most effective tool against Merab. Because Merab has very good boxing defense, but as we were talking about earlier, Umar's main strategy on the feet are those kicks. So I do think that on the feet, Umar's just going to be able to pepper him up with kicks. Even just beat him in the boxing because it's Merab. He has no striking. And Merab, I don't think, is going to be able to take him down very easily. If he does, I think Umar's just going to be able to reverse the position. I think Umar is going to be able to out-wrestle Merab. I think this is just Merab's nightmare matchup, to be honest. So I'm picking Umar Nurmagomedov to beat him via decision, honestly. 49-46. I could see Merab winning a round just by taking him down and holding him there for a little bit. But I do think that, Merab is going to lose this fight. I don't see him getting finished. I do think he'll be able to survive to the end just because Umar doesn't submit people as much as you would think he would. And Merab's submission defense isn't terrible. And on the feet, I don't think Umar's going to knock him out just because unless he lands a flush head kick, I think this fight is going to be mostly grappling exchanges. So I do think it's going to be Umar that wins this fight. I think he's going to have just as clean of a performance as he did against Corey Sandhagen. He's going to remain undefeated. And, yeah. Oops. Alright, moving on to the main event. Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan 2. So, this is obviously the most hyped fight in the lightweight division. Islam coming back to fight Arman, who Arman's only loss in the UFC was to Islam 5 years ago. But, obviously, Arman's a lot better. He's a much different fighter now. Coming off of that impressive win over Charles Oliveira at UFC 300. And then Islam, obviously, coming off of his UFC 302 win against Dustin Poirier in a war. So, this fight's actually very interesting. Obviously, Islam has seemed unbeatable for the last couple of years, just sort of bulldozing through most of his opponents. And I think that's warranted, that sort of aura, but I think if anyone is going to beat him, it's going to be Arman. I mean, there's people who would obviously pick Ilia Topuria to beat Islam, which I wouldn't agree with, but there are people who would. But I think if anyone's going to beat Islam, Arman's going to be the man to do it. I think he definitely has a much better chance than he did when they originally fought, because if you notice, when they originally fought, he had taken down Islam, which is quite a feat. But as for who I'm going to pick in this fight, I'm going to pick Islam Makhachev via submission. Yeah. I'm going to say Islam submits him late in the fight. Round 4, round 5. Or maybe even round 3. Here's the thing, is that Arman almost got submitted by Charles Oliveira twice. So I think his submission defense is going to potentially get him into trouble with Islam. But more specifically, I do think that Islam's just a better grappler overall. Maybe Arman takes him down in this fight. And honestly, I do think Arman will be able to take down Islam at some point in this fight. But I just think that overall Islam's grappling is much better. I think he'll be able to take down Arman more, and I think he'll be able to reverse positions a lot easier. I think he'll be able to threaten submissions more. And I think his striking is a little bit better than Armin's as well. And I really think that's what makes this fight is the striking. Armin showed some variety of different techniques in the stand-up against Charles Oliveira, and obviously we know Islam's striking is some of the best because he outboxed Dustin Poirier in their fight, and obviously head kick knocked out Alex Volkanovski, who is one of the best fighters of all time. So when it comes to this fight, honestly, the way I can see this playing out is that Armin just sort of looks really good early on and really impressive and has a very good early 2 rounds. And I think later on in the fight, Islam's going to be a little bit more comfortable. I think he's going to start working his wrestling a little bit more, and I think he's going to sort of figure out Armin on the feet a little bit better than some people might expect. And I think overall, as the fight builds, Islam's just going to start to outstrike him a little bit, just sort of outpoint him, outdamage him a little bit. I could even see Islam dropping him, and I think he'll be able to keep the range better. And then I think eventually it'll get into more grappling exchanges, and I think Islam will be able to get him in a bad situation, like taking his back or getting sort of that front headlock position that we've seen him get against a couple of people. And I think Armin is going to have a lot of confidence in his wrestling to a point where it might get him in a bad situation, like he was against Charles at the end of their fight when he got caught in that darce. And I think Islam's going to be able to get him in a bad spot and submit him to retain the title and officially become the lightweight GOAT. So comment and tell me who you guys think is going to win all of these fights. Tell me if you agree or disagree with my picks, and have a good one.